the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
Carrie Underwood, Green Day, who's next? The Built in the Hammer Grey Cup Music Festival sets up to be the best. The Red Blacks expose the CFL rulebook. Who will be the best in the West? And does load management need to be managed by the Third Down League? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. Thank you so much for checking into the 3 Down Football podcast that features the top analysts, columnists, and broadcasters from all across this fine country. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. Riding shotgun with me is, as always, an outstanding cast of characters and football people that you certainly are in the know with. He's dominated the Toronto sports scene for decades. From Post Media, Hall of Fame columnist Steve Simmons, always appreciate your time, and thank you for being here.
Nice to be here.
You know, in addition to his play-by-play work with the Red Blacks, he's covering the likes of Atletico, Ottawa, and an apparent resurrection of the Senators from TSN 1200. He's AJ Jakubec.
Always great to be here, Bubba.
You know, and from the Steel City, he's with the most established radio station, 900 CHML, the voice of the morning show, along with moderating the legendary fifth quarter football show, which can be wild. Let's welcome news and sports director Rick Zamperin.
Hey, Bubba, great to be here.
Hey, folks, let's get right down to business. After the announcement of Carrie Underwood as the Friday night headliner at the Built in the Hammer Grey Cup Music Festival, we've now learned that Green Day will be the halftime show performer at the 110th Grey Cup at Tim Hortons Field. Steve, I'm sure you've seen everyone from the Nylons to, I guess, Michelle Pagliaro. You've seen them all. So what are your thoughts on this show, this setup here?
Well, I'm a Green Day fan, but I'm also 66 years old. So I'm wondering, does Green Day appeal to anyone 30 and under, and of course the first question that came to my mind when I heard about it was, what's wrong with a Canadian band? Can't we find a Canadian band? And there's so many good ones that why didn't we pick one? So I go back and forth on what they're doing here in Hamilton. I love the fact Carrie Underwood's coming in. Hopefully Mike Fisher's coming with her, that's a huge get for Hamilton. I'm torn on the halftime show because I don't know whether that's going to bring anybody in at all.
AJ?
I'm lukewarm on the band, but I think it's a home run for the CFL, quite frankly, because I think it hits my demo. I'm 48. I feel like Green Day is, and I know what you're saying, Steve. I feel like they're kind of, they were big mid-90s to about 2010. So I feel like you look at the Angus Reid poll that they had out, and 55 plus CFL's doing great, but the numbers were basically even, 18 to 34 and 35 to 54, and I do think that 35 to 54 is the demo here that they're looking for, and I think that's a win. You can't just forget about a group and say, well, we have to basically focus all our attention on people under 30. I think you still have to try and win people over. In my demographic, there's a lot of people that I know, for example, like I grew up in Edmonton. There's a lot of people that I know that grew up CFL fans that are now bigger NFL fans now and maybe tuned out. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Elks stink, but, and I get they're a little bit better lately, but I feel like there's still some people in my age bracket that can be brought in if you do the right things, and I feel like Green Day's one of those bands that can bring people in. Would I like to see the Misfits or the Dead Kennedys if it's a punk band? Yes, I would. But this isn't trying to cater to me. This is trying to cater to a wide audience. And to me, it's a safe pick. It's a mainstream pick. Anyone that associates, Seinfeld's the most popular show in a long, long time. I mean, some people argue Friends. Some people will argue a Big Bang Theory or Modern Family. But Seinfeld still resonates, and they close the show. So I feel like Green Day is a safe pick, and I think it's a home run.
You know, Rick, I was kind of along the thinking, well, you set it up with the likes of Carrie Underwood on a Friday night. It had to be someone of equal international value. And I think they kind of touched it. And I think what both of our other guys have said, AJ and Steve, it sort of does hit to a demographic of about 20 to 30 years.
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of Green Day. Obviously, the Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, they have a tremendous legacy. They have a number of, big hits. I think they're instantly identifiable. I think they can command the main stage that the Grey Cup halftime show brings. But I'll take something from what Steve said. I too am a little torn because they're a great band, but I would have loved to see a Canadian act get that much more exposure. I think there was a number of opportunities that the CFL could have gone down to get that Canadian act as the halftime show. But listen, I think Green Day is going to put on a phenomenal halftime show. I don't think everyone's going to love it, but I think most people will say that was a thumbs up. So I'm a big fan, and I can't wait to see what they bring to the table.
I was in Vancouver. I would love to tell you the year, but I don't remember years anymore. When the Black Eyed Peas played the Grey Cup halftime show, and you never saw a 50-plus white audience trying to figure out what in the hell was going on the stage there. And I think 2 or 3 years later, Black Eyed Peas played the Super Bowl. And, of course, we all know they've had a million hits and done fantastic stuff. But it was dead in Vancouver. Like, it couldn't have been more dead. And here was probably one of the biggest acts that we've ever seen doing a halftime show at a Grey Cup. So you never know how something's going to go over. The nice part about about Green Day is if they have 4 songs to do, and that's usually about what you get to do in a halftime show, we can probably name them now and think that they don't have to do anything other than their hits.
And I think they have so many hits. I think they have so many hits that they're going to have to end up doing some type of, maybe play 2 or 3 songs and then have to do some type of a mashup, because I think they do have a lot of songs that are identifiable there, AJ.
Yeah, and for me, I don't even know if, I guess it's debatable. I saw some people complaining about the fact that people aren't going to buy tickets just to go see Green Day, but to me, it's not about who's going to the game. The game's going to sell out, I feel like. So I feel like if the fans there are entertained, great. That's a bonus, but I feel like this is about drawing in an extra couple 100,000 viewers if they can at halftime. To me, it's about the television numbers, and if you can get those numbers back into the 4 million range. And I don't know if Green Day is going to do it, but it at least appeals to a certain demographic that might turn on the game that maybe otherwise wouldn't.
Can I just touch one thing here? And I know it is a conversation. I've seen it all over my social media. And I thought at least the reaction on my social media was outstanding for Green Day. That's what I've seen. But the one negative, and you guys, I wouldn't even call it a negative. It's been a kind of constant mindset, is that it has to be someone Canadian. It's the great Canadian drunk off. It's the great Canadian party. I just don't know who's out there. I don't think Drake is doing this, guys. The Weeknd comes to mind to me, maybe, but he just finished doing the Super Bowl. Who else would satisfy on a large level that hasn't played the Grey Cup already? That's Canadian. That's out there, Rick. Help me.
Well, I was going to say, until you said that hasn't done it before, I would have said, hey, give me a hat trick of Shania Twain, because I think the 2 times that she did do the halftime show was outstanding, and especially the one in Ottawa where it's snowing and she's coming in on a sled. I think at the end of the day, we want to be entertained, right? And whoever the act is, they have to entertain us. It's not going to resonate, and no act would. I mean, you could bring in Drake and people are going to complain because, I don't want to hear Drake, I'm not a big fan, but they might be a fan of Carrie Underwood, who's going to play on the Friday night, and I think that's got some, mass appeal. So you're not going to please everyone with whoever you're bringing in. I think Green Day is going to do fine. I thought, if it was Drake, he would have done amazing too, and same with the Weeknd. We're talking about megastars who are playing on international sold-out arenas and concert venues, and if it's the Grey Cup halftime show, great. I would love to have seen a Canadian just to get that added exposure. The Grey Cup is all about Canadiana. It's the fabric of this country and bringing our country together from all the great cities that host, these clubs, and it's a big party. But at the end of the day, I think Green Day is going to do a fine job.
Steve, we can't do Loverboy again.
You know what? I would be happy if the Guess Who or BTO played every halftime show, for the rest of our lives. But that's just not going to happen, and it's not going to attract very many people either.
Glass Tiger?
The big problem, and it is a big problem, and you guys have alluded to it, there is an amazing amount of Canadian music talent that is mega star talent. Like, they won't play the Grey Cup. It's not big enough for them. They won't get paid enough unless they really feel like they want to do it. But so you're getting these mega stars like The Weeknd, who's playing 50,000 seat arenas and things like that, or stadiums, So you can't get the big guy, and nobody wants the small guy. So you have to find something else. And you know what? I think they found just fine, as they say. And you know what? One thing about the history of the Grey Cup, we don't remember the halftime shows. We remember the football games, to be perfectly honest. And much more so, I think the Grey Cups have been way better than the Super Bowls. And the Super Bowl halftime shows have been way better than the Grey Cups. So,
well, let's hope that
football.
Let's hope that that this year's Grey Cup nails it entertainment-wise and with the game as well, too. Let's talk about this here, Rick Zamperin. We'll start with you here. IG Field sells out more than a week after the Bombers and the Argonauts kick off in Manitoba. The Argonauts, for good reason, I guess, because they've clinched the East already, they are resting players, especially QB Chad Kelly and what was built up as a Kelly versus Caleros MOP showdown. We've seen this in the NBA right now, looking to crack down on load management. Does the CFL need to do something similar?
At this point, no. I mean, it's not an epidemic. We've seen it, once this season. We've probably seen it in the past, and it usually happens, towards the last game or maybe last couple of games when the team is clinched. It's extremely odd, especially in the East Division, for a team to clinch, with 3, 4, 5 weeks left in the season, and they start resting guys. I will say this, though. I mean, I think fans in Winnipeg were still entertained by the game they got. I mean, the Bombers had to fight back. It came down basically to the wire in the fourth quarter, and two teams that I think could meet in the Grey Cup again. I think the fans got their money's worth. I know you're buying tickets, or a lot of people are buying tickets that don't normally do to see the stars of the game, whether it's the NHL, the NBA, CFL, NFL, you name it. They want to see the all-stars on the field, and if they don't, I can understand how they feel somewhat cheated. That, hey, I paid all this money that I've earned with the cost of living where it is, and having this discretionary income. I want to have the best source of entertainment in front of me. And there's no guarantee in sports. And what we know about sports is it's about winning. If there's a winning product, you're going to go watch it. You're going to go invest in it. And this load management, coincides with that. If you want to be the champion, you got to be healthy, especially in the playoffs. So I don't disparage the Argos for what they're doing, and I think more teams will probably end up doing it.
AJ, should those people have felt robbed in Winnipeg?
You know what? What they should be is worried, to be perfectly honest. If you're the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and you just played the Argos without Chad Kelly, without Oakman, without McManus, without Jamal Peters, those are four of the absolute best players in the CFL, if not the four best players in the CFL. And you barely beat them, and you had to come back to win, be worried about your own team. Don't be so worried about who dressed or who didn't dress for the Argos. And if you want to flip to the NFL, the last week of the regular season and all of the preseason, which they charge for, they don't play their starters. They don't play their starting quarterbacks. They don't play, every good quarterback rests the last week of the season before playoffs, unless they're fighting to get in. So the beauty of what the Argos have accomplished this year is they earned the right to decide how they want to play their lineup and when. And frankly, I tend to be critical of this. I wasn't the least bit critical. Now they have so dominated the league and the East that they have earned the right to do whatever the hell they want to do.
AJ, in your own way, you work for TSN. I mean, we had a TSN couple of members on the last couple of podcasts here on the CFL this week, and they were salivating over this matchup. And I don't know. I guess I feel like kind of the luster was lost.
Well, Toronto earned the right. Steve said it. So I don't see why people are griping at Toronto. They had 6 games left, and they knew they were going to sit Chad Kelly in 2 of them. They're not going to sit him at home. So you knew they weren't. The 150th celebration of their franchise comes up next. They weren't going to sit him in that game with Doug Flutie and all the other stars there. So you knew this was probably a game that, if he was sitting twice, he was probably going to sit this game, unless you sat him a couple of weeks in a row. But with the bye week as well, how much do you want him to have to sit towards the end of the season? So to me, this is a no-brainer. The only thing the CFL should be worrying about is why these two teams didn't play in week 1 of the schedule as a Grey Cup rematch. So that's the only beef that I have with anything Toronto-Winnipeg related. I have a lot of beefs with the schedule. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, Hamilton played a few weeks ago in Ottawa. I mean, Ottawa didn't win, but I don't know how a team plays 3 days later after they played on Labor Day Monday and Ottawa had a bye week. So the CFL needs to get their house in order when it comes to the schedule. Saskatchewan drew really well a couple of weeks ago. Guess why? They hadn't played a game in Ottawa since 2019. To me, that's ridiculous. Stuff like that, the CFL needs to figure out, and the schedule is a big part of that. We should have got 2 Winnipeg-Toronto games this year, and at the very least, we should have got them in Week 1 as a Grey Cup rematch.
You're all smiles, Steve.
No, I just, you know what, I have been around the Argos for 35 years professionally and almost my entire life, you know, having lived most of my life in Toronto. This might be the best Argo team I've ever seen. And I lived through the 2 Flutie years when they were 15-3 and won the Grey Cup both of those years. So they were 17-3, you know, 34-6 over 2 years. I think this team might be better because it's so deep defensively, because they have so many options. Now, you know, we're looking at a different quarterback, you know, body in the CFL today than we were maybe back then with those 96, 97 Argo teams. You know, not every team has a quarterback anymore. Not every team has a guy that you can look at and say, that guy's legit. Chad Kelly's legit, and this is only his first year, so we're just learning about him. But, boy, they have so many options, and they figured out, you know, how they put this team together and how it happened. I don't know if it was accidental, but, boy, they've done a phenomenal job. And they have absolutely – there hasn't really been a close game their entire lineup has played this year with all their players. They haven't had a close game. I mean, the 4 games with Hamilton were jokes, all of them.
Rick, and you know what, he's true. Like, I mean, the Tiger Cats have offered no resistance, and you take a look at the Tiger Cats' record. If you don't include those 4 losses, I think it's 7-4, right? The Tiger Cats are having a pretty good season considering their quarterback situation all season long. But I mean, it is what it is there. Last thing there to you on this point here of maybe a limitation on how many players you can sit.
Well, I'm not sure if you're going to start forcing coaching staffs to do that, because let's just take Hamilton, for example, and a number of players that are on their injured list. So now you're going to mandate that certain players do have to play. And, you know, what if you come into a situation where you don't have a healthy, you know, receiving core and you're down to like your practice roster guys, and now you're mandating guys who may not be 100% to be on the field. I think that's a slippery slope that the league is, you know, they're trying to protect player safety. At least, you know, they say they do, and sometimes, you know, through their actions they kind of go against that. But at the end of the day, that's a hurdle I'm not sure the CFL wants to vault at this time.
AJ, I have no idea how surprised you were when the Red Blacks utilized the rare usage of an onside punt on 2nd down and 8. I know. Were you surprised when they pulled this off? And it is in the rule book. It can be executed. 1st down to the Red Blacks. But does this rule need to be changed? I saw all kinds of media, or at least reaction from players on social media, including the likes of a Chad Kelly saying, "Are you a joke? I think, is this a joke? And can we really do this?" Your thoughts?
Well, first off, sorry, Bubba, but they were the ones victimized. It was Montreal who had the 2nd and 18, and it was Jeff
That's right. That's right.
So, first of all, let's give credit to Jason Moss. He knew the rule book. They used it. I'd like to see the rule that they use throughout Canadian football. I believe it's in youth sports. It's certainly in junior football, because I saw a game recently. I went to go see the Ottawa Sooners, and they were playing St. Clair, and they punted. They didn't try this intentionally. They punted on a 3rd and 18. The ball traveled about 17 and a half yards. The punter recovered the fumble. He was onside. And they came out to measure. I thought I'd seen everything in football. They came out to measure, and they were short, and they turned the ball over on downs. To me, I think that is probably the way this rule should go. If you're 2nd 18 and you try this and you get 18 yards, great. I do think that that's something where you should probably be able to get the 1st down. But to kick it a foot essentially over the line of scrimmage and then be able to get a new set of downs, to me that seems more like a loophole than something that they intended for in the first place. So I'd like to see it changed to what it is in the rest of Canadian football, because I don't think it was great publicity for the league. I mean, any publicity, I guess, is great publicity in that sense, but I feel like this is a loophole that should be changed.
Well, I like the rule about the onside kick, and that a punter can get his own punt, or a guy who's onside behind the punter can recover as well. I don't like the idea of just because you've punted, you get a first down, even though you've not made the amount of yards as you talked about with the punt that you saw in junior football. I think you have to be able to make the first down. But I have no problem with the rule at all. And I'm surprised with guys like Jeff Reinbold and Mike O'Shea and some of the real clever special teams guys in the CFL that they don't use this more often. And I don't mean punter to getting his own punt. I mean having a guy line up, say in motion, onside, behind a punter, not in a position like a standard punt position, but on a second down or something where you punt it out wide and a guy goes out wide and picks up the ball and goes with it. And we've seen that in the past. I like the rule. I like the Canadiana of the rule. Of all the rules I'm going to change in the CFL, that would probably be just about the last one. But I don't like the idea of he just punted it like a foot or 2 feet or whatever it was and then recovered it and now it's a first down. I think you have to get the yards.
Rick, my broadcast partner that you know very well, Andy Fantuz, said that he's been telling his coaches that we should do this every single game. And really, because you're going to catch people off guard by doing it. It's kind of hokey, though.
You know what? When I first saw it, I thought, wow, that's genius, number one, to pull that out of the depths of the rule book. Who knows what page and subsection that was in, but good on Jason Moss and the Alouettes to find it and use it in a game because, it's one thing to practice it, but to use it, while guys are coming at you. And again, on 2nd and 18. But to me, the publicity was phenomenal because everyone was talking about it. It was all over social media. Hey, did you see this play in the Canadian Football League? Wow, that's amazing. But, the more I ingested it and looked at the play, and I thought it really cheapens the first down. Like, you needed to get 18 yards, but you got, 1.5 yards and got a fresh set of downs because the guy was onside. I think you got to get the full 18. I mean, you got to get past that, on our TV screens, that yellow stripe to get a fresh set of downs. And if you want to kick it onside, hey, great, but you still got to get that 18 to go get it. To me, it kind of cheapens, the extraordinary efforts it does take to get a first down in this league.
Can I tell you a personal high school football story? I was the backup kicker on a very good high school football team, and we're up 40 points one game, and the coach gives me the tap and says, "Go on out and kick off." I'm nervous. I'm in grade 10. I'm nervous. It's my first year, and basically I missed the ball. I just sliced the side of the ball as I'm kicking off, and it went on a 45-degree angle, about 8 or 10 yards in the air, and my wide guy picks it up on one bounce and scores a touchdown. The coach thinks I've planned this. He thinks I'm the smartest guy that ever lived. I still remember the guy's name, Ron Altry. And it was completely unplanned. I missed the frickin' ball, and he got a touchdown, and we looked like geniuses. So that's kind of what, if this guy had picked it up and then ran down the field for several yards, I would have been pretty excited.
First of all, I'm trying to envision that play. I'm also trying to envision a grade 10 version of Steve Simmons. I'm really trying to put that into my brain.
An offensive lineman size person, about 40 pounds more than I am now.
AJ, just last one to you on this. What was your call when that actually happened? Did you even recognize what happened?
Well, we'd seen it before, but I didn't realize exactly how the rule worked. Unfortunately, we'd seen Brad Sinopoli try this before a few years ago. But again, I thought you needed to at least get the first down, and the rules are different. And again, we see this. I mean, you see this NHL versus IIHF. You see this NBA versus FIBA, and it's the same thing. I just called the Panda game on the weekend, and there's different rules in the CFL that differ from U Sports, and sometimes I don't know all of them, and that was one of the ones where, again, I was confused a little bit. I'd seen it before, but still a little bit confused. Now, certainly I know the rule fully now.
Funny thing is, I wonder how many times coaches are going to pull that off now that that's really been exposed. Moving along, Rick Zamperin, your MOP candidate right now on the defensive side of the football so far through I guess pretty much 3/4 through the season right now?
It's a good race, but I think the leader who has been leading this race right from the start is BC's Matthew Betts. This guy has been a menace on BC's defensive line. He's the sack leader at the moment, going for Canadian sack record, which he may or may not get. And even if he doesn't get it, we should not take that away from him, because he has been just utter chaos for that BC Lions defense. Which at the start of the season, a lot of teams were trying to figure out, how do we stop this guy? Or put two guys on him to negate his strength and his speed and his tenacity to get to the quarterback. And teams, several weeks after that electric start from him, still trying to figure out how to get this guy wide, how to get him away from the quarterback, how to make this guy not be the disruptor that he is. There are a lot of good candidates in this category, but for me, it's Matthew Betts.
So it's interesting to me that the BC Lions were not a team any of us really talked about before the season started. And we thought, middle of the pack, we don't know how good they're going to be. And this is where you get into most outstanding player versus most valuable player. And you're looking most valuable player, he might be the most valuable player in the league for what he's done to bring that team. What are they, 11-5 or something? Like, it's crazy how good their record is, considering, we didn't know much about a lot of their players coming into the season. So he has been dominating. From the Eastern perspective, my pick as the best defensive player is McManus. I just think he's been outstanding in every game. He's everywhere the football is. I don't know how they teach that. We see it in every league and whatever. Those kind of guys are just so invaluable, and you don't measure them in stats. You don't measure them in sacks. You don't measure them in tackles. You just measure where are they when the play's happening and what are they doing for their defense. And that's what I love about Wynton McManus.
AJ, you've seen them all?
Yeah, I was actually curious to see what Steve was going to say in terms of Argos, because I feel like whoever the Argos nominee is from the team is going to win the East, and it's probably going to be up against Matthew Betts, and that's where you probably make a few calls and talk to some people and say, okay, who scares you the most in terms of a defensive player that you have to scheme for? So certainly the stats look better for Matthew Betts, and always love somebody that, not only gets sacks, but has been as disruptive as he has. But man, that Argos defense is really impressive as well. And it's multiple players, McManus, Peters, Oakman. You go up and down that list. They've got so many great defensive players. So this is one that I'm not fully decided on until I have to vote on it. But right now I would lean, just because he's on the team that has the one dominant player more than the team that's got a bunch. It's kind of me, Betts versus whoever Toronto puts out there.
Rick, Steve brings up a really excellent point, and I know we kind of discuss this every time we come around to, every time there's a tight, whether it be offensive or defensive, and it's tight, about MVP versus MOP. Are you okay with MOP?
Yeah, I mean, I always look at them as two kind of different things. If this team didn't have this player, would they be as good? And I think, from an Argo standpoint, if you take out McManus, are they going to be a 12, 13, 14 win team? Probably, although, that's a big loss in their linebacking core. If you take Betts out of BC, I'm not sure they're in double digits in wins. I mean, he's been that dominating on defense. They've had a good offense too, but that's where I kind of differentiate the two. He's had an outstanding season. There's no doubt about that. But if you take the value that he brings to the field each and every week, that's a huge loss if he's not on the field.
Sometimes you can take the Connor McDavid approach. You can be the MOP and the MVP. And there's not much difference between the two.
Yeah.
You're the best player, and everybody knows it. And I think this season, just my viewpoint, this season Chad Kelly's been the best player in terms of the MOP. I just don't see even a competition here.
Well, Steve, you just opened it up, so let's keep going, AJ. On the offense, what are you thinking?
Yeah, it's Chad Kelly for me. That Argos offense is different level from. I mean, Claros is still a really good player. BC, I don't know if they've got somebody. I don't even know who they're. I'm guessing it would be Vernon Adams Jr., but maybe
it started out to be Vernon. It started out to be Vernon, and then
Yeah,
I think it started out to be Vernon, and then he had a trip to Toronto and threw 6 picks, and that all changed.
Yeah, and it could be Betts. You're right. So it feels like it's Chad Kelly for me. I mean, he's been fantastic since day one, and really, they haven't lost a game that he started in. So I don't know, unless he was sitting like 4 or 5 down the stretch. But he's not going to sit that many more games. He'll probably sit, one more game between now and the end of the season. It feels like it's Chad Kelly to win this.
I'll make it a trifecta.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, this is a slam dunk. He has been phenomenal since day one. And I know there's a lot of Chad Kelly haters in Hamilton, obviously because he's in double blue, but he has been unbelievable. I mean, the poise in the pocket, the progression reads that he makes, never really in trouble. And, there's obviously some credit to the offensive line there, but he's made some huge plays. He has been outstanding.
You have to go back to Casey Printers with the BC Lions to find a first-year starting quarterback that has done what Kelly's done. And Printers won the MOP that year. Mm-hmm. Most of the quarterbacks who have won over the past, I looked this up, over the past 20 years, are in their 7th season.
Wow.
This is Kelly's first year as a starter.
Does that surprise you, Steve? Again, with the Argonauts wearing double blue, you've seen a lot where, and again, Flutie is kind of a bar, right? Like, let's be honest here, for what he did in his relative short time in the Canadian game. And I know they were drawing some comparisons in some way. I think they are two kind of different guys, but the immediate success Flutie did not have in his days with BC, and I guess it was BC was where he started out with, and Calgary. It kind of was a progression. But Kelly is just blown up out of the box.
Well, they're so different that you can't even compare them. Flutie was the guy who invented things on the field. He was the schoolyard quarterback. You go this way, you go that way. We'll figure out what the play is. Chad Kelly is a bit more. He's a little bit of a freelancer in how he runs and when he chooses to run and that kind of thing. But he needs coaching and he needs structure and he needs his people being where they are. That he's doing what he's doing, because we've seen how many American quarterbacks have we seen come up here with a reputation of some kind, and they just don't get it. They don't know how to play. They don't get the game. They don't get the rules. They don't react to the 12 people. They just can't do it. He said at the end of last year when he made the big play in the Grey Cup, "I'm ready to start." It sounded boisterous at the time. Didn't pay much attention to it, frankly. Everything he said then has proved to be true this season.
AJ, at the beginning of the season, and Rick, you can attest to this too, the Argonauts and Tiger Cats played in a preseason game, and Dukes was awful in that preseason game. And my thought was they're going to go into this season with a guy that's basically played one game, which was a season ender the year prior, as their starter, and Cameron Dukes. And we couldn't have been any more wrong that they went into this season with that quarterback room. It's amazing.
Well, we saw them early this year in Guelph, and the Red Blacks basically backups with Tyree Adams and Dustin Crum, who ends up being the starter. Well, they both started games this year. Badly outplayed the Argos backups in that game in Dukes and Scott. And Kelly started that game, but Ottawa won the game with a lot of their backups early in the season. And at least it gave me a little bit of hope about the young quarterback situation for Ottawa, and that's proved to be prophetic, even though the team has had some struggles this year for sure again. But that was my concern about Toronto. It wasn't about Chad Kelly. It was more about what they had behind them, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the Argos sitting Chad Kelly for some of these games down the stretch. I think Duke's probably alleviated some of those fears with his performance against the Bombers this past weekend, but there's still a pretty big gap there. So if Chad Kelly is healthy, I have a hard time seeing this Toronto team losing, certainly in the East. And I mean, anything can happen in the Grey Cup. We talked about it earlier. The game is always good. Doesn't seem to matter how different the records are, and we're going to have two great teams in it this year, I feel like, regardless. But my goodness, if Chad Kelly is healthy, I have a hard time seeing this Toronto team losing.
CFL and especially the province of Saskatchewan lose just a charm in the likes of George Reed passing away at the age of 83. Steve, you're probably closest to Reed in terms of seeing him play or knowing about his legend. Tell us a little bit about what you think of George Reed.
Well, I actually got to know George Reed quite well because in my 8 years in Calgary, he was a Molson rep in those years. And so you got to know him because you saw him around so many sporting events at the time. In fact, he did a book launch for me in 1987. So we had something of a relationship. When you look at each CFL franchise, historically, you pick one or two guys on each franchise, and those guys are the face of the franchise forever. You know, whether it's Angelo Mosca in Hamilton or Russ Jackson in Ottawa or whoever you're going to look at. George Reed and Ron Lancaster are the Saskatchewan Roughriders. He was the greatest running back of his generation. In a time today where running backs come and go and we don't see them stay very long, he was the guy that when you went out to play in the park and you wanted to be a player, I wanted to be George Reed, or Jim Brown if I was doing it from the NFL point of view. That's how great he was. And here we're talking about a guy. When was his last year? In the 60s, late 60s, probably.
I think he played in the early 70s.
Maybe into the 70s.
Because he lost the 72 Grey Cup in Hamilton.
We're talking 50 years ago.
Yeah.
He played 50 years ago. He's still the name for the Saskatchewan Route, the biggest, richest franchise in the Canadian Football League. And, some franchises we don't even have a name that we can associate with. But George Reed, historically, he's generational. If you never saw him play, I wish you had.
Rick, amazing to me that over the years, and Steve brings it up, that the game has sort of changed. They don't run the football as much as they did back in that day. His numbers in terms of rushing, still number 2 to this day.
And I think his rushing TD stat, 134, I think it's still the all-time record in the CFL. If not, it's right up there. And it's astonishing that after all these years, he's still way up there in all these statistics. And even, besides his exploits on the field, which are absolutely legendary, there's not many statues in the CFL of players. And I know he and Ronnie have one outside the stadium in Regina, and rightfully so. I mean, they are the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I never got to see him play, but I have been reading a lot about him lately. And, and this is really an example of the Canadian Football League and, the community involvement that a lot of these players had. And George, being in that town for so long and setting up a foundation and helping children and the less fortunate and just being a part of the community. There's a lot of, especially obviously American players who come up here, have great careers, and then they go back home. And that's not to say that that's the wrong answer, but I think the guys that stay here, and Mosca's a great example of this, that make a name for themselves in their community in which they starred for so long, it just adds to the mystique of their legendary status. And George Reed is an absolute icon in the Canadian Football League.
AJ, we talk greatness, and a lot of time when we talk about great football players or great of any particular sports, it's not always what they do in the arena or on the hardwood or on the football field. Sometimes it's what they do outside. And the fact that he stood for something in terms of rights and black rights, I think that just adds to his greatness as well, too.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, look, I missed his era in terms of watching him play. I remember everything kind of from the early 80s on. But, you watch the clips and you're like, okay, yeah, I can see why this guy was so great. But to me, what resonates, when I think of George Reed and I think of Russ Jackson, for example, I just think of CFL royalty. I feel like it was the same when you had Jean Beliveau and Gordie Howe and just how they carried themselves for so long after their careers and the grace and the class and how everyone spoke with such reverence about all these people. And the fact that no one's got anything bad to say about George Reed shows you just what type of impact he had on and off the field. And a sad day when you lose someone of that stature that was so great on the field, but essentially was CFL royalty off of it.
And Steve, that's amazing to me because that list of royalty in the CFL, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's very long.
Well, the problem is that what used to happen, and Rick referenced this, is that the Angelo Moscas or the Reeds or whoever, Lancasters came up here. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't know what league they were coming to. They didn't know much about Canada. They got into the community and they became part of the team. and they played 10 or more years in the same place. Who plays 10 or more years? Simone Lawrence. How many guys play 10 or more years on a franchise anymore, anywhere? You know, sport has changed that way, and the CFL has changed that way, where these guys, they come, they play their 2 years or 3 years, they go back and try to get back to the NFL, and then you never hear of them again. The day of dedicating the Wayne Harrises, you know, or the Lancasters. I remember Lancaster telling me when he was traded to Saskatchewan, he didn't even know where Saskatchewan was. And he had to tell his wife. I think he went there for either a year or two without bringing his wife, because he wanted to make sure, like, this will be okay. And, you know, and so that kind of person or player, this was a fabulous place for American football players to come, because the salary difference wasn't that much between what an NFL player made and what a CFL player made. So, you know, for $10,000 or whatever dollars it was difference a year, you know, you could have a much better life and have a long career, and then get a job, as so many did, in the community and in important places. And, you know, we saw teachers and principals and schools named after people, and in George Reed's case, statues, and, you know, and he was a, you know, pretty important business person in the community. So those kind of guys don't really exist much anymore. I mean, if you were thinking today, right now, who's been around a team other than Simone Lawrence forever? Not very many people, and not very many people that anyone's going to know. You know, it might be, you know, Derek Wigan on the defensive line for the Calgary Stampeders or something like that. But, you know, we're not talking about a lot of those kind of players anymore.
You know, Rick, it makes me think of the likes of the great Al Davis telling Bernie Custis, go play quarterback in the Canadian Football League, and a similar story like Mr. Reed going to Hamilton, not having a clue about what to expect.
Yeah, I think for all his talents, you know, Reed could have probably played in the NFL, to be honest. I mean, he was that special of a player. If you can rack up 16,000 yards in the CFL, I'm sure he could have got pretty darn close in the National Football League. The opportunity just didn't present itself, or just didn't find himself in the right place that he could become, you know, the superstar that he did. But, you know, at the end of the day, his legacy in the Canadian Football League will live on forever, because, heck, we're still talking about him. We'll be talking about him for another 50 years. He's that special of a player.
All right, guys, Elks at Argonauts, Bombers at Lions, Tiger Cats at Riders, Red Blacks at Alouettes. Your game of the week, AJ Jakubec, is?
Oh, I'd love to be able to make a case for Ottawa and Montreal on Thanksgiving Monday, but to me this is a no-brainer. It is Winnipeg, BC, because everything's on the line with, you know, whoever wins not only takes the lead, but has the tiebreaker, and so essentially we'll have a magic number of 1 to clinch the West. And mid-November, big difference whether the West final. I don't see Saskatchewan. Number one, I don't see Ottawa winning 3 in a row to cross over, so it's probably going to be Saskatchewan playing at one of those teams, and it feels like it's going to be Winnipeg, BC in the West Finals. So the fact that you're talking about home advantage in that game, and the difference of playing in Winnipeg in the middle of November versus under the dome in BC, I feel like this is a massive game for both teams and has huge implications for who is going to be in the Grey Cup, likely against Toronto. So, yeah, to me it's BC Winnipeg all day.
I'm sorry to do this to you, Bubba, but I am out of time. I have to be somewhere. So if you can excuse me now, I will say goodbye to the folks, and thanks for this. I enjoyed it.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
See you, Steve.
Cheers, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Rick, your game of the week will be?
Yeah, undoubtedly, Bombers, Lions. I mean, my gosh, these two teams have been duking it out in the standings all season long. You know, Winnipeg's kind of slipped just a smidge over the last number of weeks. You know, losing to Hamilton, losing on Labor Day, which was kind of, you know, unexpected, but still a powerhouse. And the Lions want to take that mantle away from them. They want to be the beasts of the West, and, you know, they have home field advantage this week. I'm sure they'll want to keep it potentially for a Western final against Winnipeg. You know, some of the best players in the league are going to be playing in this game, whether it's Caleros and Betts, who are going to go at each other, I'm sure. Lots of weapons on both sides of the ball for each team. Yeah, slam dunk, Bombers, Lions, game of the week. Should be fun. You
know, from a Tiger Cats perspective, I have to bring this up. AJ, we need a little help from your Red Blacks. Can you help us out a little bit?
Well, can you help us out and beat Saskatchewan? Okay? Like, we need a little give and take here.
I think we're going to knock off the Riders. Rick, you don't
Well, you
think?
should. Honestly, and I don't mean to, like, I think they're the worst team in the CFL. And look, you are what your record says you are, and so Edmonton, Calgary, and Ottawa all have 4 wins. I look at some of the wins, like, they have had some absolute gifts this year. Ottawa gave them a gift. Ottawa had the 3rd and goal from the 1, and they should have gone for it. They kicked the field goal, they lost the game. They win that game, both teams are on 5 wins, and maybe they have a chance to pass them. I think Saskatchewan, I mean, you look at their point differential, you look at everything. Like, I can't believe how bad this Saskatchewan team is. And it's a league with a lot of bad teams, unfortunately, right now. But, we're going to have 5 pretty good teams in the playoffs. I think Hamilton's okay. I think Montreal's a very well-coached, solid team. And certainly, Toronto, Winnipeg, BC, they speak for themselves. But there's definitely, it's one of those years where you feel like, okay, 5 belong, and it's kind of valedictorian of summer school for whoever gets that last playoff spot.
Rick, you look at the Alouettes, and I sit there, and I know the Tiger Cats are 0-2 against them, yet I don't think they're that good. Or maybe they are.
I say Montreal's a good team. I don't think they're an elite team. There's no doubt about that. They're not in the category of Toronto, Winnipeg, and I'll put BC in there as well, the way that they're playing this season. I think Montreal's a well-balanced team. I wouldn't even put them in the explosive category, although Austin Mack has proved me wrong a few times. Julian Stanback could still, rush for 100-plus yards and a couple of TDs a game. It comes down to quarterback play, as we know in the Canadian Football League. And if Cody Fajardo is on, that team is a much different team than compared to if he's having a bad day. So if he can figure it out game in and game out, I think they have enough talent around him to get the job done. I like their defense. They're good on special teams. Chandler Worthy, I think, is one of the best, return guys in the game. Cote kicking the ball, can split the uprights from pretty much anywhere on the field. And they're a well-coached team, as we found out last week and found out, in several other instances in this season, that whether they're finding loopholes or just managing the game well, they're a solid team top to bottom. So they're going to be tough to knock off come the East semifinal.
AJ, I mean, I don't know if it's come down to this, and again, you're much closer to the situation, and I know our fans certainly around the league want to probably know about this. Is Bob Dice and maybe other people in this organization, are they coaching or at least playing for jobs right now?
Yeah, it's such a hard one to answer in the sense that, I mean, only ownership would know that. I don't really love getting rid of a coach after 1 year. I think he's made some mistakes. Mentioned the kick in the field goal against Saskatchewan, and there have been a couple of others as well. I mean, the BC comeback certainly comes to mind, and he certainly got criticized quite a bit for the decision to kick the field goal in that one up 10, where Terry Williams brought it back and gave BC a chance. So I'd like to think that you give your coach more than 1 year to do something, but I also need to see something down the stretch here. They're 4-11. I feel like they're a good 4-11, but what does that mean? I mean, that doesn't mean anything. They're 5th in point differential in the entire Canadian Football League. They lost a ton of close games. What disappointed me about what we saw last week was, like, they were just beaten in every facet of that game. That was the first game under Bob Dice's tenure that they were non-competitive. So if they're non-competitive down the stretch, and they've got Montreal again this week, then it's back-to-back against Toronto. I don't really know what Toronto's going to dress in those 2 games, especially the last game in Ottawa. But I feel like I've made the DJ Smith analogy. This is year 5 for DJ Smith. They've missed the playoffs in every one of those years. The reason he's still here in year 5 is they won some meaningless games down the stretch to make their record look better. But at least they showed something down the stretch. I need to see something from this team down the stretch. If this team ends up 4-14, like, I feel like they've made progress. I feel like the offense, like, they averaged 16 and 17 points a game in 2019 and 2021. This offense, at least points-wise, they're coming off maybe their worst game of the year with the 6 turnovers, but points-wise, they've made some progress this year where they're averaging in the mid-20s here right now. So, yeah, they are more competitive, but they need to show it with some wins down the stretch, and certainly a lot better case to be made if you win a couple and at least point to actual progress with wins if they can find a way to get to 6 by the end of the season.
Finally, Rick, to you, from a Tiger Cats perspective and what you see, I feel like they're trending in the right way right now.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we've kind of seen this before, where the expectation was, okay, this is it. The team's on the way. This is the run that they have to make. We compare to what happened last year, as they were kind of sluggish. Labor Day came, didn't fare well, but then surprised Winnipeg, and lo and behold, they win 4 of their last 5. Can they do it again? I'm not 100% sure. I like their chances in Saskatchewan for sure. Hosting BC, the Lions probably will still have a lot to play for. That's going to be a very tough game, and the season will come down to, or at least that East semifinal playoff spot might come down to that last game of the season if Montreal slips up over the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, I'm seeing some positives from this Ticats team defensively. I think they're stringing together some good performances. I know they can even be better in that regard, which is kind of scary because they had a great game last week against Calgary. Offensively, I think we need to see a little more consistency. And if Matt Schultz is the guy going forward, I think, okay, let's get him to a consistent basis. Going 11 for 19 with a couple of touchdowns is great, but can he, make that, 23 of 28 for, 280 with a couple of TDs and no turnovers? Play that clean game, get some first down runs as well. Add some excitement into this offense, which has been rather vanilla over the first half of the season. They make the change at offensive coordinator and, thrown in some interesting wrinkles here and there. I want to see this team produce a little more on offense before I get super excited about their Grey Cup chances. But listen, they're in the playoffs. That's mission accomplished number 1. A lot more work to go. I'm excited to see what they do from here on in.
And as they always say in the Canadian Football League, and I know we saw it with an Ottawa team many years ago that challenged the likes of the Edmonton then Eskimos for a Grey Cup title, you just got to get in the party. I think that that Rough Riders team, I think, was 5-11 that year.
5-11 with J.C. Watts.
J.C. Watts.
My broadcast partner, the great Jeff Avery. So, yeah, it was that's the first Grey Cup that I distinctly remember everything. And 6 years old watching that game in Edmonton and loving everything. And little did I know that I was going to come to Ottawa and hear about double pass interference for the last 20 years and how the Rough Riders got screwed.
Well, if the Red Blacks don't do well, I can tell you, Rick can also attest to this too. Your new owner with your Senators is going to provide you with some plenty of entertainment. I think you got a great owner there, and I think the Senators are on the move. And I think they even this year could be a very scary good team at making the playoffs. So I think you got something to be happy about in the nation's capital there, AJ.
Well, hope so, because it's been, if you look at NHL and CFL, it's been a long time since we've seen any kind of playoffs, going back to 2018. So it's been 2017 for the Senators. So hopefully we get something exciting to look forward to next year.
Guys, you've been tremendous. I really appreciate your time in putting together your efforts and your opinions and your expertise of what you do here on the CFL this week. Always, you guys are repeat guys. Always great to have you as well, too. Rick, if people want to get at you about the Tiger Cats or anything in the Canadian Football League, maybe even your love for the Leafs, where can they contact you?
Well, yeah, you can find me on social media, the handle, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, @Rick Zamperin. Check out the fifth quarter on 900 CHML. You can also listen online, 900CHML.com, as we talk Ticats football and the Canadian Football League.
AJ, we're going to find you as well, too. I know a big match this week, Forge and Atletico, in what really is coming down to a great final weekend in the CPL.
Yeah, speaking of disappointing seasons, Atletico Ottawa, imagine 7-game stretch where you need some points to make the playoffs and you pick up 2 draws and the other 5 you lose, 4 of them in stoppage time and the other one in the 88th minute. So not looking good for my Atletico Ottawa, but looking forward to the end of the season for sure. And yeah, people can find me X at the Super AJ. And I'm on TSN 1200 with all sorts of coverage, hockey, football, soccer related.
Thanks again so much for joining us. And we certainly say thank you to the listeners and viewers here. You know you can catch us once a week on the CFL This Week, Tiger Cats Audio Network. This is not the only show. Of course, we're talking about game day, the actual game when the Tiger Cats are playing. So many fine programs to check out as well, too. But we certainly appreciate your loyalty to the Canadian Football League and the CFL This Week. I certainly appreciate it. Like, subscribe, you know all those things to do on social media. And, of course, your favorite podcast catchers. We'll see you next week. This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network.